Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our workshop on intellectual property and music, navigating compensation and disputes with Cory Shackelford. My name is Vanessa, and I'm the program coordinator for California Lawyers for the Arts Los Angeles office. For those of you who are not familiar with us, CLA is a statewide nonprofit organization serving the arts community by providing a number of legal and educational services across the state. I would also like to take a quick moment to share about the benefits of purchasing a membership with CLA and encourage you all to consider joining CLA as a member. Membership with California Lawyers for the Arts, you save up to 50% on educational programs, save $15 on every referral fee, and enjoy discounts on our soon-to-be-released video-on-demand library of workshops and MCLE programs. You will also have free access to recorded workshops in our upcoming foundational series, which will cover fundamental intellectual property topics. With your support, CLA continues to provide critically needed legal, conflict resolution, and educational programs for artists and art organizations throughout California, while vigorously advocating for the intrinsic value of the arts. To share a little bit more about our programs and services, I'd like to play a video from our Executive Director, Alma Robinson.
Hello, my name is Alma Robinson, and I am the Executive Director of California Lawyers for the Arts. CLA is a statewide nonprofit organization that was founded in 1974 to serve artists and arts organizations of all disciplines with advocacy as well as services that provide support with legal and business issues. With staffed offices in San Francisco, Berkeley, Sacramento, Los Angeles, and San Diego, we provide several core services. First, we provide legal counseling to specialized attorneys who provide assistance with a variety of intellectual property questions, as well as contract reviews and negotiations, and other important business issues. Depending on the client's financial status, legal assistance may be available on a pro bono or reduced fee basis. We also provide a specialized program that assists independent inventors and small startups with their patent applications. To help with situations involving disputes, we provide a range of alternative services, including negotiations counseling, mediation, and arbitration that can avoid the expense and hassle of going to court. Finally, we offer a full menu of educational programs that include workshops, symposia, and conferences on various legal topics for artists and arts organizations. Many of these programs are posted on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to use these tools to educate yourself on the legal issues before you reach out for specialized assistance from our organization. Thank you for joining today's program, and please consider joining CLA on our website at www.calawyersforthearts.org so that we can continue to maintain our full range of services. Thank you.
I would like to go ahead and get started with our workshop. I'd like to invite Cory Shackelford, our speaker this evening, to join us on camera as I read a bit of our introduction. So Cory Shackelford, for over 10 years, Cory Shackelford has been helping music creators and music right owners manage and enforce their right, negotiate more favorable deals, and maximize their income streams. In 2016, Cory founded Shackelford Legal, a transactional law firm that represents mostly music right owners, songwriters, composers, artists, labels, publishers, and various entertainment companies. Prior to funding Shackelford Legal, Cory served as General Counsel, VP Business Affairs at Wixon Music Publishing, where he helped protect and manage the catalogs of some of the most successful songwriters of all time. Welcome, Cory.
Hello, everyone. Vanessa, thank you for introducing me. And like she said, I've been a music attorney ever since I started practicing law back in 2011. And yeah, I worked with music publishing companies, songwriters, composers, represent independent record labels, do music clearance for companies like video game companies and stuff like that. So I have pretty broad experience in the music industry. And today we're going to be talking about intellectual property and music and navigating compensation, protection, and disputes. And I believe CLA definitely selected this topic. And I don't claim to be an expert on intellectual property or copyright, but given my experience, I'm definitely qualified to speak on it. And assuming assuming you are all musicians or artists or independent rights owners, I'm hoping I can give you some information that will hopefully directly help you. I think going into too much detail on intellectual property is probably not going to serve you the best. And in a 45-minute talk or whatever, I'm not going to be able to educate you fully on the topic, but we'll do kind of like a 30,000-foot view of intellectual property. We'll get into some more specifics on copyright. And then I kind of want to, just based on my experience working with up-and-coming artists or people who are trying to start labels or publishing companies, there's some like basic things that I think a lot of people overlook. And even people that have been working in the industry for decades will not have a solid foundation on some of these things. So there's some very specific things that I think will maybe help you and that you can take today and start implementing. Let's get into it. Before we get into it, though, let me just give you a disclaimer. I'm going to read this real quick. This presentation is general legal information with general applicability. This is not legal advice, and this is not advice for your situation. I do not know the facts of your situation, and I cannot advise whether this information is applicable to your situation. I'm not your attorney, and we have not established an attorney-client relationship. You should consult with an attorney if you have any legal questions. And just so you know, anything that I say today are just my personal opinions based on my experience, and they're not the opinions of any of my clients or any of my colleagues. So what is intellectual property? It's not something I think about often, what is intellectual property, but when I was preparing for this presentation, I was kind of looking up some definitions, and I couldn't find one that was like, that just answers that question, simply. But essentially, intellectual property refers to creations of the mind that are not tangible in form. It's not like a phone or a car or something, but the law still recognizes it as property. So if you write a song, for example, it's not necessarily something you can hold per se, but just like a car or a phone, the law recognizes it as property and provides you certain rights. So for example, if someone were to steal your car, you would have recourse under the law to pursue that person for damages that were caused by them taking your car. Well, similarly with intellectual property, if someone were to steal your song and use it without permission, the law provides certain recourse and protections to you so that you can pursue damages against that person. So intellectual property is it's just a subset of personal property. And just like other physical property, you also have rights and protections under the law for your creations. So hopefully that somewhat gives you a general overview of what intellectual property is. And we'll kind of go into the three most well-known types of intellectual property, and you've probably heard of these three. So the first one is patents, and those protect inventions. So not probably super relevant to most of you unless you're designing guitars or making foot pedals or something like that. But if you were to invent a new medicine or a computer, you would want to seek a patent, and what that would allow is for you to have the exclusive right to manufacture and sell your invention. And someone couldn't just come into the marketplace and copy your invention and sell it themselves without a license from you or without your permission. That's patents. Trademarks, you'll sometimes see words with this R with a circle around it, or a TM or a TM with a circle around it after. And what that signifies is that it's the word or the logo or the slogan is trademarked. And trademarks protect names, logos, short phrases. So if you think about the name or the brand Coca-Cola, that's obviously a very well-known brand, and they want to protect their brand. So they obviously don't want other people slapping Coca-Cola on the side of their beverages and creating confusion in the marketplace. So trademarks protect companies and people for their names and their logos. So, and even short phrases like "let's get ready to rumble." I'm sure you've all heard that before a boxing match or something. The person who created that phrase had it trademarked so that if anyone ever wants to say that before a sporting event or in any capacity, they would have to get permission from that person, or they'd have to hire him and pay a significant fee for him to come and say that phrase. And probably more relevant for this conversation, you think of like the Beatles, a band name or an artist name, you might want to try to trademark your name to prevent others from, selling t-shirts with your name on it or using your name in a way that creates confusion. Is like, what band is the Beatles? Or, if anyone could use the Beatles as their band, you can see how that might create confusion in the marketplace as to who's putting out this music. So that's trademarks. And then copyrights, which is going to be more of the focus of this conversation, protect original works of authorship. So for you, things like if you write a song, a composition, or if you record a song, if you have artwork on an album, those types of things can be copyrighted. Once they're created, there's copyright protection in there, assuming that they're original. So we'll get a little bit more into that. But so patents, we're not going to talk any more about that, but that's, inventions. Trademarks, we're not going to talk more about that either, but it's probably applicable to you if you are an artist or you have logos or a unique artist name that you would want to protect. And then copyrights. And we'll talk more about copyrights in a minute. Just generally, why is intellectual property important to musicians? I've kind of already talked about that briefly, but essentially intellectual property will afford you exclusive rights in your creations. And what that does, it essentially creates a monopoly for you. So no one can use your music without permission. So if you write a song, no one can just come and put that in a film without coming to you and getting permission and negotiating a licensing fee with you. Same with logos. If you have a logo, no one can just come and put it on a t-shirt, for example, without coming to you for permission. Artwork, same thing. So the intellectual property provides these protections and gives you these exclusive rights, which allow you to monetize your music. So if you didn't have these exclusive rights, if you were to put out a song, anyone could just come and take that recording and use it how they want. They could take your song and use it however they want. And you would have no ability to monetize because anyone could just use it for free. So intellectual property is so important to musicians because it essentially is what creates their livelihood. It allows them the exclusive right to exploit their works. So no one else can do it without their permission. And one of the reasons we have intellectual property is to incentivize artists and musicians to create music. Again, if there was no exclusive rights, there would be no way to monetize your music yourself. Anyone could just come and take your music. They could claim it as theirs. So we want to incentivize people to make music, and intellectual property does that. It provides these protections which make it valuable to you to create something. If you create something of value, you obviously want to get a return for it. And intellectual property is what affords you that ability. And you can imagine if we didn't have intellectual property, going back to the Beatles, you can think about all the great art that we probably wouldn't have. Of course, there would be artists that don't care about the money and would be making great art regardless, but I guarantee there would be lots of music and artwork that we wouldn't have if musicians weren't incentivized to create music by having these exclusive rights and being able to monetize it. A little bit more on copyright. So in order to have protection for your creations under copyright law, your creation needs to be original. You can't just obviously take someone else's work and claim it as yours. And it can't just be an idea. You can't have an idea to write a song about your dog running away and say, oh, well, I wrote a song about my dog running away, so no one else can write a song about a dog running away. It's how you express your idea. So the lyrics you use, the notes that you use to express your idea, that is what is protectable. And then your creation has to be fixed in a tangible medium. So you can't just, it can't just be in your head and claim, oh, well, I wrote that song. It's, I wrote it in my head 10 years ago or something. It has to be fixed in some form, recorded on your phone or written on a piece of paper, something that you can show that you satisfy that element of fixing it into a tangible media. So it has to be original expression and fixed. So once you create a song or you make a recording or you paint a picture, or whatever it is, you automatically have copyright protections and that you don't have to register with the Copyright Office. There are benefits to registering with the Copyright Office, which we can get into a little bit later, but you already have this protection and you're granted, there's 6 exclusive rights under copyright and they are the reproduction. So you have the exclusive right to make copies of your work, to put your music on a CD. You have the exclusive right to prepare derivative works based on your music. So someone couldn't just come and sample your music in their track without your permission. That would be considered a derivative work. Or let's say you had a song that was a story. Someone couldn't just take that story and make a film based off of it without your permission. Distribution, you have the exclusive right to put your music out for distribution on Spotify or iTunes or whatever it may be. Public performance, you have exclusive rights to publicly perform your music, and these rights are usually granted to performing rights organizations, which we'll get into later. But so for both your composition and the sound recording, there are exclusive performance rights. The composition rights are more broad. So, if you hear a song on a radio, or you hear a song while you're watching a TV program, or you hear a song in a restaurant, all of those performances are supposed to be licensed, and they would be licensed by your PRO. And these companies who are performing the music would have to go and seek a license in order to perform those compositions. And then for sound recordings, the performance right is more limited. So when you hear a song on the radio, only the composition is receiving a performance royalty, not the actual sound recording. So the artist isn't being paid performance royalties, just the songwriters. But sound recordings are afforded exclusive performance rights when it comes to digital radio and non-interactive streaming. So think of something like Pandora or SiriusXM. They would have to seek a performance license to perform your recordings. And then the display right, this hasn't really come up for me. I can recall. It's kind of like the right that everyone kind of glosses over, but it essentially would be like if you were to take lyrics, like sheet music or something, and display that on your website or in a storefront or something. I think that would maybe fall under the category for a composition, at least. But yeah, the main ones are reproduction, derivative works, distribution, and public performance when we're talking about music. And as I said before, these exclusive rights are essential for you to be able to monetize and protect your work. If you didn't have these exclusive rights, there would be no means for you to sue someone if they were to use your music without permission, and you'd have really no means to monetize your music if you weren't the exclusive holder of your music and the rights therein. And the last point on copyright is that your rights last a long time. I'm sure some people think not long enough. I think I read something that the Mickey Mouse copyright is coming up or has already expired. So if you were to write and record a song right now, your rights would last for the rest of your lifetime in that music, your exclusive rights, plus 70 years after you pass away. So you would be able to reap the benefits of your creations for your lifetime, and your family or your heirs or whoever you designate would be able to reap the benefits long after you're gone. So now we'll get into some basic administration things. This is probably where the next slides will probably be a little bit more tactical for you, something that you can implement right away. But one thing that a lot of people I work with, where they kind of go wrong, is right in the beginning. So when they create a song, let's say they write a song with a co-writer or they record music, they don't do the unsexy work of, figuring out who owns what, who's going to control the rights, what the splits are. And, it kind of, I'm sure it can kill the mood when you're in a studio or in a, writing session and you pull out a split sheet and say, hey, your percentage of this song is going to be 50%, mine's going to be 50%, or hey, you only wrote this, this line. So how do you feel about only taking 10%? But, these are important things that you need to figure out in order for the rest of the process to work. If there's disputes on who has the rights in your music, then the royalties won't be able to flow. Your administrators won't be able to properly manage your copyrights. So in the very beginning, you need to, if you're writing a song, who are the songwriters? What are their shares? If you record something and you have a producer and musicians, do they have any interest in the recording, or do they do it on a work for hire basis where they don't have any interest in the recordings? So these are things that you definitely want to clear up right at the get-go when you're creating copyrights. Obviously, if you're doing everything yourself, it's pretty easy to know that you're the exclusive owner of the composition and the sound recording. That's kind of the first thing. You want to figure that out. And then once you figure out what the splits are, who's going to own and control what, you'll want to think about registering with the Copyright Office. And I alluded to this earlier, but there are certain benefits. I think a lot of new songwriters and artists probably don't register with the Copyright Office, and they have the reasons. It does cost money, and it can be a significant cost for certain artists depending on where they are in their careers. But there are some significant benefits. First of all, you can't sue anyone for copyright infringement unless you have registered with the Copyright Office. So if someone were to infringe your work, you wouldn't be able to sue them. And then if you register your work prior to the infringement, then you're afforded a statutory damages, which are very beneficial for you if you are going to be suing anyone, and also attorney's fees. So, especially when you get to a certain level, most major publishing companies and record labels that you've heard of, they certainly register all of their works with the Copyright Office. So if you're taking your career pretty seriously, I recommend it, obviously, if you can afford it. So you figure out the splits, who owns what, decide whether or not to register with the Copyright Office. And sometimes this will be handled by your publisher or your label. And then, you have this, when you create something, you obviously want to let your administrators know, whether it's your music publishing company or your record label or your manager, whoever's managing your rights. You want to let them know, hey, I have this new song, here's the splits, here's the information, here's these recordings, here's what the producer's share is going to be. And then they can take that information and plug it into the system to make sure that everyone who needs to know has this information so that all the royalties can flow. And if you're doing this yourself, then you want to educate yourself on who you need to notify. For songs, you're going to want to notify ASCAP or BMI or CSAC, whoever your PRO is. You're going to want to notify mechanical licensing societies, let them know. You want to let anyone who is collecting royalties and might have royalties for you, you definitely want to make sure that their systems are updated with your information. And then if you want to try to pitch your music for use in films or get your music on certain platforms, just try to license your music. And then you want to be sure that you're collecting any licensing fees and any royalties that might be coming your way. And then enforce your rights. If your music's being exploited on certain services, you might want to issue it without permission. You might want to issue takedowns, cease and desist letters, potentially, get to litigation if it's warranted. So it's not that you'll lose your rights, but you definitely want to enforce them. And that could also be a significant source of revenue for you. There is a big significant infringement and you can get a big settlement or judgment. It could be beneficial for you. All right, now we're gonna get into some really basic stuff here, but this point is probably one of the biggest things I notice when I'm dealing with clients, that they just haven't quite grasped this concept that there's two copyrights in the music business when we're talking about the music specifically. So I write a song in my room, whatever, on my guitar. I write down some lyrics and some notes. And so I have this composition or a song, composition, musical work. It's kind of all interchangeable. And then I go into a studio and I record that composition. So now I have this recording of my composition. So there's a copyright in my composition as soon as I create it. And now that I've created this recording, there's a copyright in my recording. So there's two different copyrights here, and there's two different sides of the music business here. So we're talking about composition, we're talking about songwriters, music publishing. We're talking about recordings, we're talking artists, producers, record labels. So I have my composition, I have my recording, there's two different copyrights. Someone else could come and record my song and they have their own copyright in that recording, but I still have my copyright in my composition. And when that recording is exploited, they'll receive a royalty, but I'll also receive a royalty for my copyright. And then when my recording is exploited, again, I'll get royalties on the master side and I'll have royalties on the composition side. So it seems basic to me, but I just know how much this trips people up. But there's two copyrights, and that you need to understand that, because that's going to make understanding the rest of the music business much easier. So again, there's the composition, and then there's the sound recordings, which what you listen to, what you hear, those are recordings, and it's a separate copyright from the underlying composition. I'm going to kind of go over some more things that kind of drive that home and kind of show you these two sides of the business. Again, in my experience working with people that are up and coming artists or musicians, or even if they're not up and coming, or they've been trying to make it as a musician or an artist for 40 years, there's still some disconnect here on these concepts. And if anything, if I could get you to understand this and kind of understand different companies and what they do and what role they serve in the music business, what role they serve for you, I think that'd be a win for me, and hopefully that will help you in your career. So again, we have the composition and the recording, or the master. So when we're talking about compositions, publishing royalties, songwriter royalties, again, that's on the composition side as a songwriter. When we're talking about the master or the sound recording, we're talking artist royalties or producer royalties. For example, I've had clients that'll say, I've recorded this song and put it out and my publisher is not paying me anything. And, it was a cover song, and, they don't grasp that, look, you recorded that song, you don't have any interest in the composition. So your publisher has nothing to do with this. The publishers manage compositions and you don't own that composition. So there's no reason your publisher would be paying you royalties. Your label or your distributor, they would be paying you royalties because you control the sound recording, but that doesn't have anything to do with the composition. So just a little anecdote there, but this comes up frequently. So I just kind of want to drive it home. So on the composition, again, if income comes in, again, we're talking, these are your songwriter royalties. If you have a publisher, or if you're your own publisher, these are your publisher royalties. Typically split, 50-50, especially at your PROs. If you're signed up with ASCAP or BMI, you'll receive $100 comes in, 50% goes to you as the songwriter, 50% goes to your publisher as the publisher. And again, if you're both people, then you'll receive 100% of those royalties. And on the master side, money comes in from an album sale. Royalties are paid to the artists, or artist royalties, the artist share, producer royalties, and then the rights owner or the label will receive their share. And whatever the shares are, it depends on what your deal is with your label or your publisher. So now we're just going to focus on the composition for a minute here. So composition or song, musical work, pen to paper, we're talking, notes and lyrics, not sound recordings. So your composition, these are the key players in the music business when it comes to the composition side of things, obviously, in addition to the songwriters. So you have publishing companies, and you've probably heard of Sony ATV or Universal Music Group, Universal Music Publishing Group, Warner Chappell, Cobalt, BMG. These are pretty well-known music publishing companies. So what your publisher does is, if you have a publishing deal, they're either going to own or partially own your compositions. They're going to acquire them from you, or they're just going to administer your composition. So they'll do all the work and take a percentage. So you have traditional songwriter deals, and there's co-publishing deals and administration deals. So they're going to administer your work. So they're going to register your works with the Copyright Office. They're going to make sure your works are registered with all the various societies, your performing rights societies, the mechanical collection societies. They're going to notify all of the labels that might be exploiting your work to pay them your royalties. And their deal, you could have multiple publishing companies. You could have one for just the United States, and you could have one for the rest of the world or for Europe. If you're signing with a big publisher, it's probably going to be worldwide. Yeah, and they'll issue licenses. So if a license request, someone wants to use your song in a TV show, they're going to handle that process of negotiating, hopefully subject to your approval. So they'll issue licenses. They'll try to get you licenses potentially. They have relationships with music supervisors. They might try to go out and, pitch your music for, so for example, like music supervisors are responsible for licensing music for TV shows and films. So they'll reach out to all the publishers sometimes to say, hey, we're looking for a song that sounds just like this, or we're looking for this type of song. Do you have anything? Your publisher might pitch your music to try to land those placements. And they do other support. They'll try to connect you with other songwriters so you get different writing sessions and stuff like that. And then they'll pay you your royalties that they collect. They'll have the exclusive right to collect all your royalties in most cases. And they will, based on what your deal is, they'll pay you your percentage of the royalties, and they'll keep their percentage for the work that they've done. So that's music publishing companies. Performing rights organizations, again, in the US, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, Global Music Rights, GMR. In Canada, SOCAN, PRS in the UK, SOSM in France. Every territory has their own performing rights organization. So wherever you're located, you're going to want to register with your local society. And again, you're going to grant them so you have the exclusive right to perform your music, but you're going to grant them the exclusive right to exploit that right. So they're going to go out and go to all the local bars and the concert venues and all the major networks, and they're going to negotiate performance licenses with those establishments. So that's a big burden for even a publishing company to take on, or definitely a songwriter to take on. So every songwriter that I've ever worked with is signed up with a PRO, and that's what they do. So they'll negotiate licenses with all those companies. They'll collect your royalties, and then they'll pay out your share. They take a percentage, and they will pay out the rest of the royalties to the songwriter for the songwriter share and the publisher for the publisher share. Again, depending on where you are in your career, that might be the same person. So you might be receiving 100% of those royalties, or you'll be receiving your songwriter royalties directly. PROs don't like to pay songwriter royalties to music publishers. So you'll almost always receive your songwriter royalties directly from your PRO, and then the publisher share will flow through the publisher and eventually make its way to you. And there's mechanical rights societies. So in addition to the performance royalty, there was the reproduction and distribution right. So there's these mechanical royalties whenever your song is copied. So when you stream a song, there's a mechanical royalty. There's also a performance royalty. So you're receiving performance royalties from Spotify, for example, and you're also receiving mechanical royalties from Spotify. Don't want to complicate things, but But yeah, so there's mechanical rights societies that are collecting mechanical royalties. So the MLC is a newer one, and that's something that you're probably going to want to do some independent research on. They have, I think it's like $424 million in unclaimed royalties that they've received from the various digital service providers like Spotify and Apple Music and Google. So they have this big chunk of money, $424 million, that they don't necessarily know who to pay. So all the publishers and all the major publishers are going in there and claiming all their songwriters' works and trying to make sure that they're properly registering certain works to make sure that they can get the piece of that $424 million that they're entitled to. Yeah, I think that's the number. I'm sorry if that's not. So if you have music on any of these platforms, you definitely want to go to the MLC, put your information in, your songs, the splits, if you have a publishing company, and some of that money might be, I'm sure there's someone on here who might be entitled to some of that money. So definitely look into the MLC, and they're doing a good job of trying to get people to claim that money. So definitely go on there, and there will be a bunch of resources and people there to help you navigate that process. CMRRA is in Canada. They do mechanical rights collection. MCPS is the company in the UK that does it. Harry Fox Agency and Music Reports Inc. They provide various services, but you might have maybe gotten an email from one of them or like to opt into a license or something. They kind of help these companies facilitate licensing with the music industry. So you might want to check out those sites as well. There might be licensing opportunities for you there. They're kind of in the mechanical rights collection world, but I think they do more than that as well. But yeah, you might want to check out those services as well, because there might be some opportunities there for you. And then digital rights management and licensing agents. So I'm sure a lot of you have music that's released through TuneCore or CD Baby Pro. These companies handle both compositions and recordings, depending on what you deliver to them. So they kind of serve a similar role to a publisher, but on less of a customized approach. It's just kind of just getting your music out on the platforms, collecting royalties. It's still an important function, but it's not going to be the full service music publishing experience. That's where you might go, especially earlier in your career, to distribute your music. And, there's really established artists that distribute their music through these companies as well. They'll kind of help you navigate getting all your music on the platforms and collecting those royalties, and they'll pay those out to you. And then there's various trade groups on the music publishing, composition, song side of the business, NMPA and AIMP. And similar to Harry Fox and Music Reports, you might have seen emails from them about potential licensing deals to opt into. But these companies organizations are really important for kind of protecting songwriters and publishers. And, there's other interests. Obviously, the Googles and Amazons of the world are trying to limit the amount that they're paying songwriters and publishers. So these companies kind of bring the publishing community together and the songwriter community together to lobby to get better rates and royalties and better rights for songwriters and publishers. So definitely serve an important function. Similar to California Lawyers for the Arts, you can try to get a membership with these companies, and they provide various resources and benefits. And yeah, they'll also do these big industry-wide settlements with usually new like digital service providers that launch without getting proper licenses from publishers and songwriters. So they will go after these companies and sue them and negotiate these big industry-wide settlements that you can opt into. So if your music's being exploited on any of these platforms and you kind of don't know like where are my royalties, you might want to check out some of these organizations to see if there's potential opportunities for you to opt into their deals to collect your royalties. And they also issue awards. If your song does really well, these might be the companies that are recognizing you as a gold album songwriter or something like that. So that was on the composition, publishing, song side, songwriter side of the business. And now we're going to talk about the reciprocal companies on the master, sound recording, artist side of the business. So on the composition side, when you have music publishers, on the sound recording side, you have record labels, and they serve a lot of the same functions. So again, you have the Sony, Sony Music, Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group, Disney Music Group, Big Machine. There's, tons of labels that I'm sure you're familiar with, and they kind of do the same thing. They negotiate deals with artists to acquire rights in your music, and then they are responsible for exploiting it. They're going to be the ones to file with the Copyright Office, a copyright registration. They're going to be the one to make sure your music is released and put on various platforms, and they're going to collect all the royalties. And pursuant to your deal, they're going to pay out the royalties, whatever your artist share is, and they're going to retain their share of any royalties. Just like a publisher, they're going to be the ones to issue licenses. They'll most likely have the exclusive right to issue licenses for your music. They will, just like publishers, but probably traditionally more so, they will market the artist and promote the artist and promote your recordings and maybe even provide tour support and things like that. So record labels serve an important function for artists, publishers serve an important function for composers. And as you saw, a lot of these big organizations have both a publishing arm and a label arm. So a lot of times songwriters and artists who are both artists and songwriters will be signed to the label arm as well as the publishing arm. Sometimes they'll just be signed to a label and they'll have a publisher somewhere else. So on the composition side, you have performance royalties. You also have performance royalties on the master sound recording side. So maybe you've heard the term neighboring rights. That's a term that we use to refer to public performance royalties for sound recordings. And here in the US, Sound Exchange is the company that collects those royalties from digital radio, like SiriusXM, Pandora, non-interactive streaming. So if you have any music that you've released and you haven't been to Sound Exchange and made sure that your recordings are properly registered on there, that's definitely something that you should do. They're the exclusive company that collects those royalties here in the US. So definitely go there. And then PPL is the company in the UK that handles it. And similar to on the composition publishing side, there's performing rights societies throughout the world. So wherever you're located, there's probably a performing rights society that is handling your territory. There's two funds that I kind of wanted to just throw this in here. So if you're a musician and you played on recordings, you might want to check out AFM, SAG-AFTRA fund. Yeah, just if you just were just to Google SAG-AFTRA unclaimed royalties, there's going to be this site where you can see if you're entitled to any royalties. So I would definitely recommend, if you are a musician, that you go on there and type in your name and see if you're entitled to any royalties. I'd say 1 out of 10 of my clients that I start working with, I search their name on there and they have some royalties that are owed to them. So I don't know, there might not be significant, but still money to be collected, and you might as well collect it. And then also another similar one is the Film Musician Secondary Markets Fund. So if you're, I think this is specific to film recording or TV recordings. So if you've performed on any scores, you might want to check that fund as well, the Film Musician Secondary Markets Fund, and see if you're entitled to any royalties. Hopefully one of you has some royalties and you can send me a thank you note. Similar digital distribution licensing agents. So there's your traditional label who's going to give you a full service experience. And there's also, you might just want someone to just handle distributing your music, and you have other people that are handling your promotion and radio and whatnot. So there's various companies that are just for digital distribution. They'll make sure that your music's out on all the platforms and collect royalties. And like I said, TuneCore does it and CD Baby, they have a composition publishing service, and they also have a sound recording service. So kind of the same function, just for the two different copyrights. And then the sound recording record label business also has their own organizations who will lobby for rights for the artists and the record labels and producers, similar to NMPA and AIMP. On the publishing side, there's RIAA, AFM, SAG-AFTRA, NARAS, and they'll be the ones. RIAA is the one that does the platinum album, stuff like that. I can see how it's confusing because there's companies that are performing the same function, but if you understand that there's two different copyrights, and so they're performing the same function but for two different works, if you can really wrap your head around that, you're going to be better off than a lot of people that are even working in the music business. So again, on the composition side, let's talk about some of the income streams. So sync income, it's kind of one of the sexier ones. Everyone wants their music, and to be placed in the hottest TV show or in a commercial. So anytime you hear a song on a TV show or in a film or in a video game, that's all been licensed. And that can be a pretty valuable income stream for certain artists or certain songwriters, because we're talking about the composition. And you can have songwriters who aren't very popular on streaming services. They don't get a ton of streams, but their music is just perfect for film and TV, and they get a ton of sync deals. So that could be a significant income stream for certain people. And then there's certain people who get no sync deals, but they do extremely well on streaming services. Yeah, so sync income is, and these aren't in any particular order, but sync income is a significant income stream. Performance royalties are a significant income stream. Again, we're talking about your royalties from ASCAP, BMI, whatever your PRO is. And, like I said earlier, I work with a lot of composers. Some of these composers, this is kind of like their retirement. They could earn 6 figures or more a year from performance royalties because their music is being streamed in TV shows every night, or is in a popular film that's constantly being played on TV. So these royalties are very significant. And, even if you do really well on a streaming service, these royalties could be significant. Or if you have music on the radio, these royalties could be significant. So that's another income stream. Mechanical royalties, again, if your song is streamed on Spotify, at least for the interactive portion of it, you are entitled to mechanical royalties. If a label is putting out CDs or vinyl, you'll be receiving mechanical royalties for those products. So, this is an important income stream as well. Print royalties, a little bit less, smaller piece of the pie for most artists. But, if you're a legacy artist that, everyone wants your sheet music, then that could be a significant income stream as well. People have to, pay to use your music, whether it's in print or sync or, on Spotify. However your music's being used, you're entitled to a royalty. And then there's other licensing income, like sample deals. There's some artists that get sampled a ton, and that could be lucrative because, when you do a sample deal, you might just get paid a fee up front to have your music sampled in another artist's composition or track. Or, especially if you have some pull, even if you don't have pull, you can demand that you have a piece of ownership in the new work that the artist is putting out with your song in it. And, maybe your song, there's tons of examples where your song or the songwriter's song, hasn't really done that well, or maybe it was popular in the 70s and hasn't, no one really knows about it. And then all of a sudden it's sampled in a new song and they get a, 50% of that new song. Now all of a sudden that's like a significant source of income for them. So toys, if music's used in toys or karaoke service, again, these are all, anytime your music's used, there's a requirement that there be a license or permission, and you can negotiate a fee for that use. And similarly, on the master sound recording side, there's there's a sync for a composition, there's sync to use the master or the sound recording. So same thing applies. If someone's licensing music for a TV show, they have to go to the publisher and they have to go to the record label to clear the music. They have to clear the copyright for the sound recording, and they have to clear the copyright for the composition. Performance royalties, we touched on that. If here in the US, you should go to Sound Exchange and make sure that your music is properly registered there and that those royalties are flowing to you. Digital sales, interactive streaming, similar on the publishing side. If you sell downloads or your music is streamed, you are entitled to royalties for the use of your master recording. And those royalties are collected by the label or you directly or your distributor and paid out pursuant to your arrangement. And then similarly, there's other uses for masters. Same with the sample. If you're sampling just the composition and doing your own recording of it, you only need to clear the composition. But if you're sampling also the sound recording and using the actual sound recording in your new track, then you would have to get permission from the record label or the rights owner and negotiate a deal for that. And same toys, if you're using a certain recording, or you'd have to get permission from the sound recording owner. So those are the income streams. And then here's some, I've kind of already touched on this, but here's some places that you should go to notify people of your rights and to make sure that the royalties are flowing to you. So I guess first, you should have some kind of internal content management system. Some of these organizations might require that you deliver your catalog in a certain format, like CWR format. So there are services that you could maybe pay a subscription to get your music in the right format to be able to deliver it to these services. And this also helps you track going back to the beginning, when you create a song or recording, it helps you track, who the writers are, who the artist producer is, what credits, who the publishers are, what the splits are. So all that information can be tracked in these content management systems, and it helps you, establishes you a little bit, gives you a little bit more credibility when you are dealing with people, but it also is going to allow you to better have your music ingested by these various societies and services. So on the composition side, again, when you write a song, you're going to want to notify your publisher, and so that they can notify whoever they need to notify, including their sub-publishers around the world, that, hey, Cory wrote this new song, here's the splits, please make sure that you're collecting at all the various societies. Again, you're going to notify your PRO. If you haven't already signed up with ASCAP or BMI or CSAC, contract, definitely go and check out those companies and see if it makes sense for you to sign up. And if you are a songwriter, it definitely makes sense for you to sign up. But they'll have representatives that can talk you through the process and why it's important. Again, we talked about mechanical rights societies. You might want to definitely go visit the MLC, make sure your music is properly registered there. And you might want to check out HFA and MRI to see if there's anything there for you that might be of interest. If you're using a CD Baby or TuneCore, again, you're going to want to notify them of any new releases and make sure that your music is being properly managed and royalties are properly flowing to you. If you know of any, like, for example, if you know there's a record label that owes you money, you're definitely going to want to reach out to the record label and, see why you're not being paid royalties. Sometimes it's just a matter of they don't have your information. Maybe you moved or something. But, if there's someone that is out there that is using your music and you're entitled to royalties, don't be shy. Definitely reach out to them and make sure that you're collecting your royalties. I told you about the trade groups to check those out. And then we talked about copyright registration. You could also visit the copyright office if you are interested in copyright and you want to know more. They have these circulars that go into detail about certain aspects of copyright, and those could be very informative for you. And they'll also walk you through the copyright registration process and why it's important. Similarly, on the label side, you definitely want you want to make sure that your recordings and your rights and, if there's any producers or that are owed royalties, you kind of want all that documented. So when you do go to these various services that might be managing your copyrights, that they can ingest your information cleanly and properly administer your works. Again, if you have a label deal, it's probably exclusive. So if you are writing music and releasing recordings, you're probably going to have to notify them of that. And they're probably going to have to be involved. Again, I told you about Sound Exchange or whatever neighboring rights society that you're in your territory. You're definitely going to want to make sure that your recordings are properly registered there, or that they're aware of what recordings you performed on. So, definitely keep track of any recordings. Going back to the documentation, if you are performing on recordings, you make sure you're keeping track of what you're performing on. So when you do reach out to these societies, you can let them know all the recordings that you should be claiming your shares on. Again, your distributors, licensing agents, you're going to want to provide all of your sound recording information to them. If you know anyone that's using your recordings, you definitely want to notify them, address changes or anything like that, or notify them, hey, I haven't received my royalties, what's going on? So you want to maintain that open communication with anyone that's owing you royalties. If you are recording music and recording cover songs, you're probably going to want to get permission, or you definitely going to want to get permission to record those songs. There is something called a compulsory license, which would allow you to, Section 115 of the United States Copyright Act would allow you to release recordings of compositions without permission, but the obligations that you would have to follow are pretty onerous. So if you are releasing covers, I definitely recommend reaching out to the publisher and trying to secure a license. It's even though that can be a difficult process, it's much easier than complying with the compulsory obligations. And, a lot of publishers are happy to help. They're grateful that you're trying to do it the right way. Yeah, definitely reach out to publishers, and then trade groups and copyright registration. So let me get down into the disputes just quickly. If you are involved in a copyright infringement, whether you're the infringer or someone's infringed your work, you're going to want to try to definitely, well, first of all, before that, you're going to want to avoid any type of copyright infringement. So I definitely highly, highly recommend that if you're doing anything using people's music without permission, that you stop doing that and that you don't do that in the future. It's not worth it. It's not worth it to try to play that game and, try to fly under the radar. So try to avoid it altogether. And then if you do get involved with an infringement dispute, definitely seek a competent counsel who knows what they're doing. That can make a world of difference. Music business is pretty specialized. So you're not going to want to just hire your uncle or whoever who does real estate law, for example, or even business law. You're going to want someone that knows the music business. Document if someone's infringing your work, make sure you try to capture as much evidence as possible before you reach out to them. So they might have everything pulled down. You're going to want to have that evidence at your disposal. So document everything before you notify the infringer. And then the goal, my recommendation, if you are in a dispute, try to resolve it just quickly and amicably. Litigation is not for the faint of heart. It's a long process. It's draining. Takes up a lot of time. So if you can avoid it, I definitely recommend it. And sometimes you can't avoid it, and that's just what it is. But try to always resolve things quickly and amicably. And then, don't be afraid to stand up to some of these companies, especially if you know you're in the right, and especially if you have competent counsel. And don't be afraid to pursue some of these larger companies. And then here's some additional resources. If you want to know more about music copyright law, here's some good resources for you to check out. And then, thank you. And let's do some Q&A.
Hi, Cory. Thank you so much for sharing all your information with us in regards to different issues when it comes to intellectual property and copyright. Now I'd like to go on to the questions. Let's see, we have a question here. Since I was unaware of splits and copyright registration years ago, what's the best way to approach former band members who helped make the master recordings of songs I 100% wrote? Is there a good and fair way to approach everyone?
Yeah, so just generally speaking, it's tough to say but just generally speaking, when you write a song, let's say it's been years ago and you had your bandmates help you record it, hopefully there's still good relationships there. If not, I think it's just a matter of reaching out and just saying, hey, here's the situation. I'm releasing this music. We never figured out the paperwork. We never figured out the rights, who controls what. I'm planning to exploit this music and trying to land sync deals or whatever it is. And, I'd just like to make sure that everyone's on the same page before we start doing that. And it is important that everyone's on the same page because, you don't want to license something for use in a TV show and indemnify the studio, which they're going to require that you indemnify them, that there's no third-party claims. And then one of your bandmates is sitting at home watching Netflix and they hear their song or a song that they, feel like they co-wrote or that they're entitled to a piece of the sound recording. And then they hire an attorney and then the attorney sends a cease and desist letter to Netflix and then makes you look bad, could prevent you from getting future deals. So it's important that you do clear that up. And, it's just a matter of reaching out and educating everyone and making sure they're all on the same page. For your specific situation, you might want to consult with your attorney or an attorney, maybe through California Lawyers of the Arts, to see if there's something more specific that for your situation that you might want to do.
My stage name is Trademark. Do I need to start an LLC publishing company? And also, how do I transfer my copyrights and trademarks in a family trust?
That's definitely something you're going to want to talk to an attorney about. I can give you specific advice on that matter, but just generally, for a trademark, you don't need to have an LLC or anything like that. But there might be specific reasons to your situation that you might want to form an LLC. So that's definitely something to talk with an attorney about. And that's probably, for example, I'm a music attorney, but I don't deal a lot with corporate formation or anything like that. So you might even want to just consult with a general business attorney to see if there's something when you're going to start a corporation or an LLC. You definitely want to deal with someone who does that on a daily basis. So I always have my clients go to an attorney who specializes in that. And then for transferring things to your estate, just generally, if you have a will, a lot of times I've dealt with artists or songwriters who pass away. It's designated in their will who controls what or who's entitled to what. And if there is no will, then it's just passes through the law, and your jurisdiction will decide who the rightful heirs are. But yeah, and that's something I don't specialize in wills and trust and estate planning, but that would be something to consult with. I would say an estate planning attorney, because like we said in the beginning, intellectual property is just like other property. So it's pretty standard. I think most estate planning attorneys would be able to handle that, to be able to decide or just have a clause in your will or your trust to designate how your rights in your music and royalties are to be allocated after your passing.
Any tips for attorneys wanting to get into music law?
Yeah, so I get this question kind of a lot, so I should have a good answer for it. But, the one thing I'll say, that the music business is one of those businesses where you kind of have to pay your dues. Obviously there's exceptions to that, but because it's so desirable, there's so many people that want to be in entertainment or want to be in music. So you're competing with a lot of other attorneys. So that means that companies don't have to pay you very much, especially when you're starting out. So, it's not the easiest way to make money as an attorney, I wouldn't say. So I would definitely recommend, if you are trying to get in the music business, that you have a passion for it, and that you're willing, not that you have to sacrifice, but that you're willing to, maybe make some sacrifices to see your career through in the music business. It can be difficult for some attorneys. They see their friends making, much more money doing different things, and, they can kind of get drawn away from the music business. So it's definitely something that you should be passionate about. As far as landing like your first job in the music business, it really comes down to relationships and networking. My first job, I was an attorney, but I took an assistant position because I wanted to be in the music industry, and it worked out well for me. But you might have to try to land positions that are maybe you're overqualified for, or that might hurt your ego a little bit or something. But if you really want it, then you can find a way. But yeah, networking, going to just meeting people, being persistent and educating yourself. When I first started out, I was constantly reading, all the various books, these books that I have here, and, trying to find licenses online just to read through and understand it, and, going to conferences and meeting people, and, you start to see some familiar faces, and oh, this guy's serious, or this girl, or they, them, whoever, is very serious about this, and, maybe we should give them a shot. So just networking, building relationships, and, being educated and showing that you are interested, and you're not just, looking for a sexy job, but like you're in this for the long haul.
My wife wrote a screenplay. She wrote lyrics to 7 songs to a company. We want to produce the movie soundtrack. She writes the lyrics. I compose most of the music. Should she copyright the poetry lyrics, and should I copyright the music and mastering? If she hums a melody, but I am composing all of the original tracks, I am the sole songwriter. Wondering about how to register with BMI as both publisher as well as a songwriter. Would she also have to register as a songwriter, or just copyright the lyrics? That was a bundle, Cory.
Yeah, and I think there's some concepts getting mixed there. But just speaking generally, so if we're talking about, let's take a play or a musical, it depends on what the deal is. So, when I do a composer deal with a studio or someone producing a musical, there's an arrangement there. So who owns what? And sometimes composers will negotiate, hey, I'll do this, but I want to keep ownership in the music. And sometimes the production company will say, we can't let you have ownership. So we need a full buyout of all your rights. It needs to be created on a work for hire basis. So, first, like I said in the beginning, like that, the who owns what the splits are, like that all needs to be figured out first. So in a situation where you're working with someone, there needs to be an arrangement between you two of who's going to own and control what. And then once you get that figured out, then okay, so the composer is going to own the music, so they should be the one registering it at BMI. Or the production company is going to own the music, so maybe they're the one that registers it at BMI or ASCAP, wherever. Or whoever owns the music should probably be the one that is registering the copyright at the Copyright Office. So it really initially comes down to the arrangement between the composer and whoever's hiring the composer to create the music. And once you guys figure out who owns what, then that will kind of dictate who's responsible for registering the works. And whoever is retaining the ownership is probably going to be the one that's going to be responsible for all the registrations, whether that's at your PRO or the Copyright Office, or going to the MLC and registering your works there, and so on.
As someone with experience in the field, what advice do you have for someone interested in using a wide array of samples in their music?
Yeah, again, generally speaking, I'm not giving any of you guys legal advice. Sampling it's one of those things, like, it's just, if that's what you want to do, like, you kind of have to play by the rules. And it can be very expensive to secure. I've helped people probably in this person's shoes try to secure licenses, and it's too costly. The labels and publishers probably aren't going to approve it in many cases. So, it's just it's a tough thing to do. It is quite a feat when there are established artists that are doing it. If you want to use a very popular song, you're probably not going to get the time of day with a publisher or a record label if you're not established yourself. I feel where you're coming from. It is tough. I don't recommend it. There are artists that just do it anyways, and they deal with the consequences. Some it has paid off for some, but definitely not something I recommend. I've been on the other side of it, going after people, and it's not something I enjoy doing, especially when it's an independent artist that has no money, and they're just trying to don't fully understand all the rights involved and, might not even know what they're doing. You have to look at it from the artist and songwriter's perspective. They might have so many people ripping off their music, and whereas you're coming trying to get a license, so you feel like they should work with you, but there's just so many people trying to use their music, and they might be really protective of their music. I can imagine if you wrote a song that you like were really passionate about, and some artist came and say, hey, I want to use your song like this, in my track, and they might be like, I didn't make my song for you to put it in your track, and I don't necessarily like your music or whatever. So, you have to come from their perspective, and they might have so many people ripping off their music, and you might be the example, you might be made the example of like, look, I let this go 1,000 times. And I've had this happen to me where an artist is like, look, everyone's ripping off my music. Like, I don't want to be a bad guy, but like I have to take a stand. And you might be the person that they take a stand against. So it's not that they're evil people or whatever. They're trying to, beat down the little guy or something like that. It's just they have rights in their music, as we discussed, and they have the right to enforce it. So if you are going to go that route of doing it without a license, just beware that you could be on the chopping block for whoever's rights you're infringing upon. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. It is like an impossible feat, especially if you're licensing a bunch of tracks and you have no money and you're an unknown artist. Like, it is nearly impossible to get everything that you want. So, and that's just the way it is. I don't have any specific advice for you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much, Cory. And again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, have a good night.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you all for staying on. I really appreciate it and hope you got something out of it. Yeah, thank you.